Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for taking the time to join us. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the time at your respective locations. So thank you very much for taking the time to attend this. Well, today, we all know companies have an increasing need for real-time insights, but those insights depend on an understanding of the data and its journey throughout the pipeline. That's we're talking about data lineage. We also know that companies are embarking on their cloud journey, the cloud migration journey. And we've seen them in our collective experience, we've seen them facing a lot of challenges. What are those challenges and how do we avoid those challenges? To talk about that, we have two experts who are going to be actually conducting this interview. We're going to learn from them in this webinar. Let me quickly introduce them. We have Nissim Ohayan, who is the Director of Business Development at Octopai. Nissim comes with more than 2 decades of rich experience taking customers through their digital transformation journeys. Octopai and Calsoft have a partnership wherein they engage the customers in everything related to data analytics, and as part of customers' engagements related to analytics and essentially transformation journey, both the companies have partnered to help their customers. We're also joined by Vikram Shabad. Vikram is a data architect at Calsoft. Vikram has close to 20 years of consulting and implementation experience in enterprise architecture, analytics, and governance projects. And I'm Vipin Shankar. I am the VP of Engineering at Calsoft. Once again, thank you all for taking the time to attend this webinar on data lineage, more specifically on the challenges or pitfalls we should be looking out for when we embark upon the cloud journey. We're going to actually have this in 2 parts. We're going to have an understanding of the pitfalls and how do we avoid that, recommendations for avoiding those pitfalls. And then we're going to have a demo by Nissim on the Octopai platform, which can help us resolve some of these issues. So let me quickly take a look at, okay, we have quite a good number of people already joining in. So today, I'm very glad to see that we are going to be having quite a varied mix of people who are going to be attending this. Okay. So we're going to have people from engineering, design, a lot of people who have subscribed and also have chatted with us on this and on this particular topic. So we have people coming in from the engineering background, CXO level folks are also there, and a lot of product managers and finance. Okay, that's good. So we have a good mix of attendees here. I will actually, let now Nissim and Vikram take over from here. Vikram? You're on mute, Vikram.
Thanks for the introduction, Vipin. I'm glad to be presenting today. Hello, everyone. I hope you're all having a good new year. So if you've gone through a cloud migration, or if you have one in flight, some of what we'll discuss today may seem like obvious things. Other parts, maybe you've always had at the back of your mind. We are hoping to illustrate some common pain points based on our collective experience with our clients. And then we'd like to present one thing that you need to do to address these pains effectively. So before we start, let's acknowledge the sheer global scale of cloud migration activities happening today. Just look at these figures by O'Reilly with a sample size from a survey by O'Reilly with a sample size of almost 3,000 respondents from over 100 countries. Based on the job roles we identified during registration, you all in the audience are well represented in the survey with a mix of programmers, architects, C-suite executives, and managers from diverse industry verticals. It's clear from these figures that cloud migration continues to be a large chunk of IT activity globally. Also, you may have noticed recent news items highlighting the increased scrutiny on cloud spending. Traditionally, digital transformation has been endorsed at all levels, so justifying spending on these programs has not been difficult. And IT budgets around cloud migration have been almost uninhibited. That golden era may be ending as industries across the world brace for a harsher economic outlook by tightening controls and diligence around IT spending. This makes it all the more important that available IT dollars are put to the best use. So with that in mind, let's consider what can go wrong in a migration. Nissim, would you please gently ease us into the complexity of cloud migration?
Yeah, sure. Let's take a look at this data flow and see if we can understand exactly what we're getting ourselves into. And maybe if you're looking at this image, you're probably wondering to yourself, wow, this is horrible. This is scary. So the reality is that your sense of discomfort is correct. This is a very complex little part of the process. You have to start mapping out every single one of your workflows. And while this kind of a mapping might look somewhat familiar to you, what it really represents is only a single part of that. In other words, one data flow for an entire data system that you're migrating to the cloud. It could be an ETL, a data warehouse, a reporting system, an analysis system. These are systems through which many different data flows are passing through. So obviously, you'll have to do this over and over and over and over again until you've got them all kind of mapped out. So the good news is that it's good information. You'll be able to use it. But as long for as old as it gets, it's already going to be out of date pretty much by the time you finish mapping out these workflows. So the reality is that it is a kind of an iterative process. And in fact, if you've created this workflow and then you come back to it maybe a month later, 2 months later, it'll be an indication, but you'll probably not trust it very much. If you're an engineer and you're trying to do impact analysis, you're probably going to want to go through the process all over again until you understand exactly what the lay of the land is today. So it just means that there's a lot of work ahead of you. This is a complex project. It's going to take some time. So perhaps that is why this looks so familiar to you. If you've actually seen this kind of thing before, that you've kind of having to document so much, and it's a kind of a labor-intensive process. So in today's session, we will be covering pitfalls like these. This I wouldn't call a pitfall. I would think this is just kind of an illustration, but we'll go through the 5 pitfalls in a moment. But first, I wanted to give it over back to Vikram, who can maybe give us a kind of a lay of the land as to the overall project. What are the kind of parts of that project that you can expect to get into?
Thank you, Nissim. So any change management initiative is complex, and cloud migration is no exception. The fact is that change is hard for everyone. So when you're working on a large transformative change like cloud migration, naturally you'll need a lot of planning and coordination to ensure a smooth migration. This is all typically driven by a dedicated cloud adoption program management office. So let's look at it from their perspective. I'm sure many of us in this webinar are here because we are on the PMO too. So you start with an assessment phase in which you identify the assets to be migrated to the cloud based on business imperatives, agility, total cost of ownership, technology risk, etc., and the human factors, skill sets, and adapting to change. Then you have budgetary guidance, prioritization, and planning. And if you're a large enterprise, you have a large team, maybe including specialist consultants involved in these activities. And since a big bang migration carries a high risk of failure, you plan for a staggered approach. So your PMO will put out a priority list. Dependencies between applications and services need to be analyzed, documented, estimated, and their migrations need to be planned. And even before you've created your very first cloud resource, it's already a complex undertaking with dozens of people involved. So communication is key to a smooth migration, and your documentation becomes the frame of reference for that communication. And now think about the actual migration. You need to be able to roll back any problematic deployments. You can't break any upstream or downstream integrations. You need to stay on budget all the time, and you need to move within the timelines you committed to. The complete migration would, of course, iterate over these steps over and over again. So do these steps resonate with your own experiences with cloud migration?
Okay, so then that's a good time for us to take a little bit of a segue um, to understand, where you are in the migration journey. So I'm going to do a quick poll. I'm going to launch a poll for all of you, and yep, okay, got to see that now. Yeah, so we would like to understand um, where in the cloud migration journey you, meaning your organization, is. It will really help us in getting an understanding of that. And the next few minutes we'll talk about, as we talk about the pitfalls, you'll also be able to, both the experts also will get an understanding, and there's a perspective that they can share. Okay, I think we have pretty much, I'll wait for a couple more seconds here. If I could encourage a few more folks, just take a couple of seconds. It won't take more than that. Okay. Any of these four or anything else that you, if the phase that we are calling here, we've listed here, is not what you call, then you can just mark, we can just vote for others, and we'll talk about that in the Q&A session. Okay, I think we have responses now. Okay, are you able to see the result? Nissim and Vikram?
No.
Okay.
Oh, there we go.
Yep. Okay.
So pretty much in the early stages, it seems, which is good. We might be able to help with some impact here. All right, great.
Yep.
That's good feedback.
1/3
Thanks.
in the assessment phase, I would say, and a little more than close to 40% in the planning and prioritization phase. Okay. Good. Okay. Let's go ahead. Yep. So,
all right, let's go.
Listen, over to you.
Great. So essentially, then we are now at the meat of today's webinar, and that is we're going to cover these 5 pitfalls that we want you to kind of look out for and try to avoid. Primarily, of course, at the beginning, you're always going to start with some kind of an assessment. You need to know exactly what you're getting yourself into. So at the start of that project, you'll start building your data team. There'll be some perhaps that are going to be hired from professionals, like in the teams of at Calsoft. They've got professionals that can come in and beef up your team, and give you guys a little bit more bandwidth. And then you'll go through and you'll start to go through all of your different data assets and do that in very granular fashion and some good organized fashion, so that you'll be able to get a good understanding as to exactly what you're getting yourselves into. The next part is to take that information and break it up into parts so that you can kind of divvy up the work to different groups, different parts of your team, so that you can identify the parts that would make sense to start with, what's going to need to follow after that, who's got the technical skills for each one of them. And there's a lot that goes into the thought behind that as well. The next one is identifying those cold data snowballs that you want to make sure that they don't start to really gain momentum and grow. What that means essentially is there is cold data, meaning data that's not really used very much and not updated very much. It really doesn't have much functional purpose, but you don't necessarily know that, because it's hard to understand sometimes what data, what parts of which data is actually active and in use. So what happens is you might have to make a decision to decide, well, let's migrate it just to be safe, or let's not migrate it and see if there's any problems. So what happens is you end up quite often migrating to be safe. And therefore, you start taking into your new environments and data that is no longer really even in use, but you're going to pay for it, because now, unlike on-prem, you're going into the cloud, and everything you migrate to the cloud, every column that you add to the cloud, everything that you're doing there is going to cost you money. So you have to be very careful to avoid that. Vikram's going to give us a great insight on that. It's supposed to, with some customer examples. The next one is you want to avoid the scenario where you've migrated and you're just too scared to turn off the old system because you're not sure yet whether everything is properly being duplicated or replicated in some way to replace all of the functionality that you had in the old landscape. So the idea here is basically get to the point where you can really do it with confidence and know factually that you can switch off the old system without any real impact. And then finally, as you're going along, you're going to have opportunities to take down some notes about the data assets that you're looking at while you're working on them. And we're going to share with you some ideas as to the importance of getting that information out there and available for the business. So those are the top 5 that we've selected for today's webinar. I'd love to get your feedback afterwards as well. So Vikram, let's get started. Tell us about how you plan for the landscape assessment.
Thanks, Nissim. So let's get started. So speaking from the perspective of your program management office, before starting your transformation journey, you need to have a clear picture of what you're transforming. You want to look at all your applications and services and decide what you're going to move to the cloud and what you want to keep on-premise. Then you need to estimate the cost and resources required in each phase to plan your timelines and the order in which you're going to migrate your applications to the cloud. Like say you're a bank and you're migrating your payments architecture. So you have your point of sale API, your POI device interfaces, your storing and forwarding, timeout reversal, and other operational applications. Then you have pipelines carrying all this data to your data science applications, dashboards, and so on. You have all these applications with their various components hosted in your data center, and you need to know what virtual or physical servers they occupy with their inbound and outbound connections to other application components and services so that you can migrate them in sync. How can you achieve a clean cutover without having a clear picture of all your applications and infrastructure and their dependencies? The answer is you can't. So where do you get that picture? Most enterprises rely on application inventory, maybe an enterprise architecture model, but these repositories are only as good as they are well maintained. In our experience, most of the time you have no up-to-date models of your landscape. So you end up working with old information because different parts of your repository were updated at different points in time. In general, the longer the legacy in your landscape, the more fragmented and outdated your documentation. Also, a lot of knowledge remains in the minds of subject matter experts and never really gets documented. You can get this information while talking to these SMEs, but it's not there in the documentation that you can use to plan your migration. Just imagine the consequences of losing sight of a single upstream or downstream integration and the impact it can have on your customers if it's broken even for a short time. So even though it's difficult to get an accurate, up-to-date picture of your application landscape, you really can't do without it because every blind spot is a potential cause of failure during your migration. So we have a solution in mind that we'll come to shortly. Meanwhile, Nissim, please could you tell us about the next pitfall?
Yeah, by all means. So setting your program roadmap. How do you divvy up all the work again? So before you start your transformation journey, you need to have a very clear picture of what you're transforming. You want to look at all of your applications and services and decide what you're going to move to the cloud and what you want to keep on premise for whatever reason. Once you've made that decision, you may want to be sure that you've got it all. So this is typically driven by a central program office, and it can take sometimes months or even years. So, oh, wait a minute. Hang on a second. My apologies. There we go. Oh, hang on. I thought something was off. I was not reading the right slide, so my apologies for the delay. So here we go. So the next pitfall of the challenges of the program roadmap. I thought something didn't look familiar. So now in a multi-year migration, What you're really doing is you're migrating to all your data stores, a few at a time to the cloud, sometimes in large bulks at a time as well. Your centralized infrastructure team has selected a cloud provider, maybe two, and within each application portfolio, you'll do some POCs perhaps a little pilot. Perhaps you go into migrating some low impact, low risks assets just to get comfortable and make sure that you understand what's going on. Bring in your IT operations and support teams and get them acclimatized to what's going on, making sure that everybody understands where to find everything. You need to decide then at that point what you're going to migrate first, what you're going to migrate after that, and then next and next and next until you've gotten through your entire portfolio. The key success factor for most of these stakeholders is to mitigate risk. And that of course, is not going to be very negotiable. So while the migration is directly addressing technology risk, your business has to be on top of its game the entire time. The migration is not going to be able to result in issues that are going to be felt by the customer, by external partners, or even internal stakeholders, which means migrating in the right order and minimizing the risk of failure. And on top of that, being able to roll back if you have to. You need rollback plans in place as well. So in order to be mitigating the risk for these applications, it's imperative to have a solid evidence for all of your prioritizations and your decisions behind them. And that's the first part of it. I think I'll leave Vikram to cover some of these other points here.
Thanks, Nissim. So some other points you want to consider are what applications require the scalability, high availability, or ease of maintenance that cloud infrastructure affords you.
Hey, just a minute. I think, Vikram, you probably are, just make sure on the right slide. Yeah. Sorry to interrupt you. Yes, go ahead.
All right. So you need to consider what applications require the scalability, high availability, or ease of maintenance that cloud infrastructure provides you. And if you've done your technology risk assessments, what applications scored the poorest on your assessments? And how can you time your migration to minimize costs by migrating to the cloud just as your on-premise licenses are expiring? Along with all this, you want to keep showing incremental progress to your stakeholders. And you also want to minimize cloud-related costs, such as the cost of data egress from the cloud to your remaining on-premise applications. For example, if you migrate your operational applications to the cloud, but your data platform is still self-hosted, you're going to end up with a lot of data leaving the cloud and headed for your data center. And those costs can really start to add up. So with so many driving forces, there isn't an easy formula to help you prioritize applications for migration. And so there's really no substitute to having a clear understanding of integrations between your applications and databases to help you prepare your roadmap. So we come to my favorite, the cold data snowball. Okay, who among us has worked on an enterprise data warehouse with 500 tables or more? Was there a way to make sense of all those tables, and were they properly organized? All right, I see some hands going up already. Now, who among us has seen a wide fact table with hundreds of columns, many of which aren't even measures? More hands going up. Was the purpose of each of these columns clear? Was its provenance known to you? And did it have fresh data quality metrics? The answer to these questions is usually no. We did not have this information. I see these scenarios in almost every large enterprise, and I think everyone working on data platforms has encountered them. How it usually happens is you set up the initial version of a data mart, and as it becomes more popular in the company, you get more and more requests to add columns that seem relevant to specific people. And as the table grows, it gets harder and harder to track whether new data being requested already exists in the data mart. So you end up with multiple copies of the same data in new tables and new columns. What's worse is that many of these columns are often never even used anymore. We had one case in which a client's data warehouse team were unable to identify a single dashboard, automation process, or end user for more than 60 columns out of 150 in a wide fact table. This is your cold data that is rarely or never accessed. Now, when you're migrating your data warehouse to the cloud, all that cold data really starts to add up. And it's not just about the cost of cloud storage. You have data engineering teams developing pipelines to keep those tables and columns updated. You have your QA team and analysts trying to test them, when instead they could be focusing on data quality issues that really matter. And how do you even test data for which there are no known users? So there's a cost to performing all this unnecessary work in the cloud. And the longer it takes to identify your cold data, the larger the snowball effect it has on your budgets, your timelines, and it's a huge drain on your team's motivation too. In the end, you don't want to just export all your technical debt onto your brand new cloud platform, do you? So you have a clear need for being able to differentiate between what tables and columns are used and which ones aren't. Moving on to pitfall number 4, interim dual architecture. So we spoke about how large-scale cloud migration is a multi-year process. So now we're going to talk about a situation you'll face during that process. There's a long transition phase when you will have moved some applications to the cloud, while others remain to be migrated. You're looking forward to the benefits you're going to get from the cloud, but you face the worst of both worlds during this transition phase, also known as unplanned hybrid or interim hybrid. And every single non-functional requirement is harder to fulfill during this period, whether it's security, operational costs, or managing technology skill sets in your team. Because whatever solution you implement has to work on both sides of the cloud boundary. This high complexity makes it easier for systems to fail. So there's more urgency to recovering from failure. Time, money, and your team's patience are going to be stretched to the limit, and people are going to be under a lot of pressure. The migration may even be paused for some reason, lengthening the process and aggravating their pain. Unforeseen technical and business issues may also mean that not everything can be migrated, so you may have to endure this pain for longer than you expected. So the question is, how do you deliver smooth service to your internal and external customers during this painful phase? One thing you'll definitely need is a way to frequently and automatically keep your data flows and integrations observable across the months and years of your migration. And finally, our last pitfall for the day, and there's none better than Nissim to tell us about it.
Yes, documentation. So, it's with the best of intentions, everybody's being out there nowadays with their data governance initiatives and large data governance platforms that are designed to help the business to catalog everything, right? So understand who owns what data assets, what's the process by which we get approval to use an asset, who knows what the provenance is for every data asset, and so on. All of that is kind of important in so many organizations nowadays. But the more that we speak to people that are in this process for years, years after they've actually kicked this off, they still find that it's a very small percentage of their assets that are actually documented. And the reason for that is kind of still being elusive. So we're going to kind of uncover that a little bit and understand why. But ultimately, let's realize it is the business that needs the documentation in place, more so than the IT, because the IT side of the house pretty much understands the data from a more technical perspective, and they don't necessarily have as much in. I wouldn't say that they don't care, but they don't have as much interest, let's say, in what the actual business value of these data assets really are. So getting the business value out of these assets is important to the business itself, but the people that actually know this information or that can know this information typically are IT. So how do we get IT to help to document a little bit more on the fly, meaning while you're on while you're in the middle of this massive migration of every single data flow, every data element gets touched, gets looked at, you're going to see them all. How do we get the opportunity to capture information in that workflow? So that's kind of the goal here, because really, if you look back at it at the end of the project, you'll look back and you'll go, oh, what a shame we didn't document it on the fly. Let's initiate a new project, and we're going to partner with the business to get this done. But it never rises to the level of priority that it possibly should. So the idea here is that we're going to try and give you some tools here to understand how you can document on the fly in a functional functional way that the business will be able to take advantage of that. But at the same time, that there's also a great advantage for the IT side of the house as well. So that kind of rounds off the big 5 pitfalls that we had wanted to discuss with you guys. I think at this point we have a quick summary before we get to
I think it's a good time to actually thanks Nissim. But I think it's a good time to just take a quick short poll here. Now that we have an understanding of these pitfalls, it would be good to understand. A lot of folks here already did the earlier poll. So from that, now if you could correlate and let us know which of these pitfalls would have you most worried. So I'm going to actually launch another poll for that. And if you could take a quick few seconds to answer some of these questions, I really appreciate that. Which of these pitfalls that you just learned about are you most concerned about? And you probably see as you do the migration or plan to do the migration, you think you are going to get worried about just looking at the kind of pitfalls that we just learned about. Okay, I think we have a good number of people already responding. We are just doing a quick check. Let us, I'm going to end the poll now. Yep. Okay, I think we have the last one. Yeah, just a couple more seconds. Okay, thank you. Let me share the results here. Nissim and Vikram, you can take a look. So again, I would say close to 27% related to the assessment.
It's actually more evenly distributed than I thought it would be.
Yeah.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. So it sounds to me like these challenges are actually resonating to some extent right across the board. That's good to see. And what do we have next is...
At this point in time, I think, go ahead. We can quickly do a summary of that and then move into the demo. Yeah. Yeah, Vikram.
You're on mute.
Sorry about that. So after all the doom and gloom of discussing pitfalls, it's time to look at solutions. So let's start by looking at what connects all these pitfalls. What we've just seen is, 1, your ability to plan, estimate, and communicate your migration process is limited by the information you have about your data flows and integrations. 2nd, any difference between ground reality and what your documentation says can lead to miscoordination, delays, and unnecessary costs. And finally, you have a high level of dependence on your SMEs and tribal knowledge. And this impedes access to the information you need to plan and track your migration better. And you may have noticed that these are common threads across any transformative change, not just cloud migration. So what's the solution? We are about to demonstrate that having reliable end-to-end and up-to-date visibility into data flows across systems is necessary to address all of these concerns. So let's head over to the demo booths and ask Nissim to show us how we can have this visibility using Octopai. Nissim?
Brilliant. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay. Everyone can see my screen, I hope. All right, we have very short demo set for you guys. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to take you through all 5 of those challenges and the pitfalls that we talked about and show you how a tool like Octopai will be able to give you kind of a unfair advantage in this type of a project, let's call it. Okay, so first of all, at a high level, we talk about the landscape assessment, and we want to know what do we have in our system. This is the Octopai dashboard of the cross-system lineage. We have 3 levels of lineage. I'll get into that in a moment. But basically, what you're seeing here is a listing of all the systems and how many of each of those files per system we have. So we've got 2,500 different database objects, files, and analysis services. We've got a tiny number of reports in these 5 different reporting systems, and we've got a bunch of ETLs and stored procedures and so on the ETL side. So this is kind of the higher level of the dashboard, but you can go a little bit deeper, or quite a bit deeper, when you go into the discovery. So just as a quick understanding, to get to this point, by the way, the effort to collect this kind of metadata granularity with Octopai would take you somewhere between an hour to a half a day insofar as your side of the setup. It takes about 24 to 48 hours to go through the process, and then boom, you log in and this information is going to be ready for you. So essentially what you're looking at here is a listing of all of the metadata systems that we've collected metadata from, and all of the different types of metadata that we collect from each one. And you can tell that they're quite different per data system type. There's not just a generic, oh, it looks like metadata, we'll collect it and we'll try to make sense of it. No, we know exactly what kind of metadata we're collecting from each system. So we'll actually list for you exactly what we found and didn't find for those types of separate types of metadata. So you can see here all the different systems that we have in this demo environment. And then we've got here, for example, I'm going to use a SQL Server example. I'm going to go into objects. And just as an example here for the landscape assessment, you want to see, for example, the various number of different objects that you have here. You can actually see that there's, sorted by schema, by object type, by name, by all these different areas. But if I wanted to maybe group stuff so that I can understand exactly what do I have, I just roll it up here. Let me just expand this to a larger list. Okay. And now I can start to see how many different types of schemas I have. Okay. So for example, I would actually even go into one of these right away and say, well, you know what, let's just pick one. Let's see if there's one that I'm more familiar with. Well, go ahead with any one of these, I guess. So once you've actually clicked on it, you'll actually see the actual source code that it was actually built from, which we're going to come back to that a little bit later on as well. So essentially, this is at the answering the question about the landscape assessment. You're going to be able to see some pretty granular information and understand exactly what kind of a project am I really getting myself into? How many tables and how many source target tables and source tables do we have, and so on. So that's pitfall number 1. We're basically giving you one quick example for each pitfall. Pitfall number 2 was setting a program roadmap. So I'm actually going to go right back to the same one. I'm going to go back to the objects again, okay? And let's go ahead and sort it by object type is schema. But on top of that, I also want to do object type as well. So now, go back down here again and expand this. So now what you're seeing here is that I have not only the schema, but I also have the different types. And I can actually now start to sort through and see which of these object types do I want to give to somebody who's going to be doing the DBO schema? Which type of object types do I want to give to the work that needs to be done on stored procedures or in views and so on? So now, based on the personnel that you have and who is ready to get the work done next, you can actually organize the work in such a way that you can actually easily identify the right work for the right teammates at the right time. So that's one quick example on program roadmap. The next one, I'm going to stay in the data discovery module for just a moment to demonstrate that again, and that is the cold data snowball. And that is that one here. I'm going to use a slightly different example. I'm going to go to SSIS. Here we go. So in SSIS, I see that I'm actually collecting and loading data for 90 databases. Okay, so that's good information. Maybe it's not completely revealing, but let's say that you already know that you actually have 190 databases. So you now know that there's another 100 databases that are either in use by some other ETL or some other process somehow, or if I can identify that there's nothing that is actually refreshing data into those databases, and there's nothing, no report. I can do the same thing, by the way, for SSRS. I can go down to the reports, and I can see which reports are, where's the SSRS? Here it is, okay? I can see that there are 114 databases that are collecting, that the reporting system is collecting data from. So now I've got a way that I can actually sort them by database name, by schema name, whatever way I want to identify and organize my information. I can now identify all of the databases that are definitely landing on a presentation layer, or that are actually sourcing data and refreshing the systems. So you can actually identify which are these real cold data snowballs that you want to kind of melt away and get them out of the way so you don't have to worry about them in your new environment. Okay, so that's example number 3. Moving on to example number 4, and now we can come into what I think is probably more of the fun side of the Octopai platform, and that is the Lineage, of course. Now, let's say that I'm actually in the process of migrating a large data flow, and I've mapped it out, and I can see it very clearly in my legacy system. Let's say I'm going with load DWH. It can quickly find that information. I can go in and I can then do a cross-system lineage for it. And let me just draw an example for you. Let's say that I'm actually migrating from SSIS, a data flow that goes from SSIS to SQL Server to SSRS. And my target environment is going to be Azure Data Factory to Azure SQL to Power BI. So it's going to be a complete migration of the entire data flow. And I want to make sure that everything that I created in my old flow is still going to work in my new flow. So if that's the case, then I can go ahead and I can actually have 2 actual separate instances of Octopai running on 2 different systems. Here, I'm just simulating it as if it were the same, as if they were different. But basically, you would go back and forth between the 2 of them and compare what does one flow look like compared to the other. You could start to say, okay, so my analysis services that I've looked for, I'm checking that off by moving it out of the way. I've looked at that, and I've looked at this, and I've looked at that, and I can see everything that's going on for that kind of a flow. And you can just continue to do that until you've actually mapped the different, both of these data flows, and until you're satisfied that you can say, okay, my new environment is an actual recreation of my old environment, and possibly with some great enhancements, and possibly with some old stuff removed. But at the end of the day, I now know that I've actually mapped everything, and I can see that the extractions are supporting my my mapping. And now I can actually decide to switch off the old data flow until I've got them completely all off, and I can completely shut off the other system. So that's the idea of eliminating the need for dual architecture for longer than absolutely necessary. Okay. And then the last one is the documentation on the fly. For that, I'm going to take you through a bit of a workflow. I'm going to say we're migrating from SQL Server to Snowflake. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for some SQL code that doesn't work in Snowflake. As many of you that have done these kinds of projects before probably know that very well, that you can't, not everything that works in SQL will work in Snowflake. So let's go ahead and look for some open bracket, okay? And I'm going to basically look through all of the different, the same systems that we were looking at before. This time, instead of looking at everything, I'm only looking for the source, the database objects or the system objects that have this kind of character string. And I can see that I don't need to waste anybody's time. The system owners for Oracle, SSIS, and ADF don't need to open a ticket. I don't even have to bother the person in Informatica because I already know where to look if I'm interested in making any changes there. But we did say that we're going to migrate to SQL Server. So let's take a look at the SQL Server codes, objects that were found. There's 2 views, 2 stored procedures, and a function. So great, we found them, right? This is the holy grail, perhaps, right? But wait, all it's telling you is that you found some open bracket. We haven't told you yet whether or not you should migrate this object. This object might need to be migrated, but maybe not. So just like we did before, we want to avoid bringing over cold data. Only telling us that it's there and that it might be impacted is a start. Let's go ahead and copy this. Before I do, I just want to show you where did we find the sum open bracket? Well, we found it right there. Okay, and we can actually go straight into the lineage from here, but I want to do one more quick step before we do that. Oops. I want to go now to the data catalog. At a very high level, just to understand the data catalog. Of course, this is for the business users. It's got a nice, simple interface that gives you the ability to easily manage the assets you have by status, by type, choose what you want to filter by, keep an eye on what are the conversations that are going on around the assets and so on. But let's go quickly into the data catalog itself, and we can now search for our object. So vSales product summary is what we're looking for. We found 6 assets that match. 2 of them have a green check mark. Let's click on the one that's actually called vSales product summary with the check mark, and that one here is marked as approved, and it's not PII. It's got a certain rating. It's got some tags. It has a data owner. It's got a data steward. So we can see here that there's definitely some interest on it from the business. In fact, it's marked as approved. So as a data engineer, if I'm looking at this and I've been told I need to, part of my migration project is to make sure that I remediate all some open brackets that are going to be migrated, I can be sure that this one's going to be on my list of migrations because it's support. It's actually it's part of the project because it's been approved. So let's go quickly then into doing the cross-system lineage. We can actually very quickly see all of the systems that are impacting or potentially impacting this object. Sorry. Now you can see here that we've got this object here is our vSales product summary. It's getting its data from these 2 tables, and they're getting their information from these 4 ETLs. And I can actually expand this picture further if I wanted to go backwards and seeing anything else that's upstream of it. So you can see if there's upstream by the shadow, there's upstream additional information, and then there's potentially downstream additional information here. But the idea is this is already telling you everything that is impacting or that can be impacting this object right here. Now, if I wanted to dive a little bit deeper into it, I can go straight into it. And this is the inner system lineage, again, showing me the code, including the sum open bracket there. We can now show the person working on this that there are 3 columns that are making up this view, and we can see the transformations from the source, transformation, and target. We can see exactly what's going on, but this is only telling us what's going on inside of that one database object, the view. If I wanted to see how did total do come into being, and where is it actually going to be used in a report, so I can go straight from here into the end-to-end column-to-column lineage and very quickly reveal the entire source to target, transformations, and so on that happen from the time that it came in from the business application into the ETL, through the transformations, back into a database, loaded up into a database, loaded into an ETL again, and on it goes until finally it ends up on the report. And at that point, you can actually see it in the report in deeper fashion. You can go straight into the inner system lineage of that report. And you can see again that total do sum that we were looking at a moment ago, but this is inside that one view inside of the report. But in fact, in some cases, you have functions that are transforming inside the report as well. Here, let's say that we found a calculation. And if I found this calculation and I want to make it available to the business, I might, let's say, presuming that that calculation was related to total do sum, I might, for example, say that I want to go to the data catalog and report that back to the business users. Okay, so everywhere that you were in Octopai, and this is a very very high level demo, you can understand that there are links back to the data catalog, back to the discovery, back to this type of lineage, and that type of lineage. So that gives you the ability to let people that are working inside the lineage to also be able to very quickly shift over to the data catalog and share this rich information with the business users so that they can self-serve from it. And that is the fifth of the pitfalls. How do we make sure that you get the opportunity and hopefully take advantage of that big opportunity to document as you go, and therefore leave behind not only a working environment, which obviously you have to do, but also the ability to provide an environment that is actually going to be self-servable by the business. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing, and if you can go ahead and share your screen, Vikram, we'll go ahead and sum this up. All right, great. So let me just, one quick second. Sorry, my screens are all messed up here. There we go. All right. So what we've seen here today so far is these 5 very impactful pitfalls that you want to try to completely avoid in this migration journey. We've analyzed them, and we've seen that one thing that they have in common is that they're very much addressable with this type of tool that can give a lot of visibility and a lot of collaboration capability as well. So to avoid these pitfalls in the future, what are we recommending for you? Well, take these little steps, one step at a time, of course, but let's take a look at what you can do here. First of all, definitely get yourself a partner that's going to help you to perform a proper assessment. You do want to know what you're getting yourself into. Sometimes you start these projects with all good intentions, and you start to uncover that there's a lot more than you had bargained for, and these projects then tend to drag on, and that's not a good thing. The next thing is select your technology toolkit. Yes, obviously we do recommend Octopai, but there's additional capabilities that you might be needing as well. But the point is, get that toolkit in place. Do an evaluation. Come in from Octopai's perspective, will give you the ability to do an analysis of your own system so that you can actually validate that this is going to work for you. And then that's it. Just hit go and let's get started. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Vipin. If we can open the lines for questions. I'm sorry. I see that we are very tight on time.
I know. We just have about 5 minutes. Yeah. Thank you very much, Nassim, for that. Thanks, Vikram and Nassim, for the telling us about the pitfalls and the demo. And then, okay, let me quickly now open it up for questions. Yeah, we have quite a few. Okay. Oh, let me take this first one. Calsoft is working with us for the migration of assets from on-prem to the cloud. If we opt to integrate Octopai for data lineage, how much time will it take, and will it disrupt the workflow?
I guess the question is about how much time will it take for Octopai to get up and running? Yeah. That's actually quite nice to, that was a softball question, I guess. Thank you for whoever asked that question, because it's the easiest one of all to answer. It takes anywhere from about half an hour to a half a day in terms of your effort. It's going to take a little bit longer on the other side, because basically once you upload that information to Octopai, it takes 24 to 48 hours for the information to render. And then basically we onboard your team, take you through the process as to how to use this information. What are you actually seeing here? How do you use the tool? There's some great best practices that you'll be given, and of course, every customer gets a client success manager assigned to them, so you're never left alone. It's not one of those log in and figure it out for yourself. We take every customer by the hand.
Thank you. I think there's another one here in landscape. I'm assuming that's a landscape assessment the person means. In landscape, do you get overview separated by the database instances and applications?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that is the way that the data comes in. But I'm going to probably need to get what is that? Aparna? Aparna. Aparna, if we have your contact information, we'll be sure to get back to you with some details on that. But I'm not 100% sure how to answer that question for you. But we can certainly take that offline.
Okay.
Could I try and answer that?
Go ahead. Sure.
Okay, go ahead.
So the way physical tables are organized in a database is you have a separate schema for separate applications. And as Nissim demonstrated, you can organize your landscape report by schema. And so when you get that list of schemas, you're seeing essentially one or more schemas per application. So definitely when you're looking at migrating application by application, you'll do it by the schema as well. So I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Rico.
Okay. I think we have time for one or two more.
One or two more, yeah. How does Octopai charge? Does it depend on the size of the data or its complexity?
Actually, it's a very simple pricing model. We charge for the access to the platform, and we charge for the number of different metadata systems that you're scanning. What we do not charge for is the number of users, the number of times that you're actually using the tool, the number of times that you run the analysis. All of that is, is unlimited use perspective, but that's pretty much the model. Okay.
Okay.
So it means that you'll basically be able to easily budget. You won't be in a situation where you're going to suddenly run out of funds because you're using the tool.
Thank you. Okay. One last question. Does data lineage help in finding orphan data?
Actually, yeah. One of the things that you'll be able to do is you'll be able to check that all of your tables have a source and a target. If there's a transformation, if there's no target, then there's something that's missing there. There's a number of ways that you can make comparisons and understand that that you have elements that are orphan. You can also see it in the lineage. Sometimes you'll build a lineage and then you'll find that there's something that just doesn't go anywhere. So that'll be a good indication as well. But yeah, it's actually quite useful that way.
Okay, I think we pretty much a couple of other questions that are there. We will certainly answer those directly. I think it's time to wrap up now. Thank you very much, everybody, once again for taking the time for attending this session. And thank you very much, Vikram and Nissim, to educate us all about these pitfalls. And the audience, if you have any questions or would like to share your thoughts, please reach out to us on any of the email addresses that you see on the screen. And we'll sure, I think there's another one. Yep. Okay. Marketing and there's Octopai. Yes. As I mentioned earlier, Calsoft and Octopai are partners, and we do engagements for our clients wherein expertise of this tool is coupled with the talent that Calsoft brings. Coupled with the tool from Octopai, and we bring the services to our customers. And as I said earlier, in all the challenges that they face in the transformation journey. So thank you very much for attending. I really appreciate that, and thank you very much, all of you. Once again, have a nice day.
Thanks everyone.
Thanks, Vikram.